Hi BookTube, Aaron here. Hope you're doing very well. Today I'm going to be going through my plans for what I want to read in May, so during next month. It feels a bit weird just saying that. Normally I do my wrap up of the month just gone and my plans for the following month, the month about to begin, all in one video. But I've noticed in recent months they've been getting really, really quite long, and so I'm going to experiment and I'm going to do my reading plans for the next month today, and then in about a week's time I'm going to go through a wrap up of everything that I read in April. But I will begin with what I'm reading at the moment because it's going to sort of spill into April, I think. It feels like a nice way to start things off. And that there are really just two things that I'm concentrating on at the moment. I'm dipping into a number of things that may come up later on, but the two things that I've been concentrating on the last few days have been the complete poems of Marian Moore. Not too far in, I'm taking it relatively slowly. I'm about just shy of 50 pages. And Marianne Moore is a modernist poet who is, I'd say, sort of unexpectedly formal and quite, or very idiosyncratic in the way that she uses form, and it feels very weird and odd and modernistic, I suppose. And I've been meaning to read more of her for ages. I've read a few poems of hers in anthologies and things. And I've sort of randomly dipped into her complete poems every now and then. I first found her in this. This is one of my just favourite books as an object. This is the Penguin Book of Modern Verse. And this was really my introduction to modernist poetry. It's got T.S. Eliot, Ezra Pound, Carl Sandburg, William Carlos Williams. I think it's got a James Merrill poem in there. I've never actually read this all the way through. It's got some Elizabeth Bishop and Robert Penn Warren and yeah, all kinds of things. But about 100 pages in, I encountered Marianne Moore. And there was just this one poem that it's just the way that she was using language in the poem sort of stood out and felt more vital and odd and noteworthy than a lot of the poets I'd read so far in the anthology. And it's called Smooth Gnarled Crepe Myrtle, and it begins like this. A brass green bird with grass green throat, smooth as a nut, springs from twig to twig askew, copying the Chinese flower piece. Business-like atom in the stiff-leafed trees, blue pink dregs of wine pyramids of mathematic circularity. One of a pair. A red bird with a hatchet crest lights straight on a twig between the two, bending the peculiar bouquet down, and there are moths and ladybugs, a bootjack firefly with black wings and a pink head, and goes on just describing a bird and the food it eats. And when you say it out loud, just the way it feels in your mouth, if you can find it online and just read the poem out to yourself, it's really lovely. So far I haven't found a poem that quite matches that for me in her complete poems, but I'll keep going, and hopefully there'll be something. But, every now and then there's just something that's lovely and surprising and sort of makes me giggle to myself as I'm reading. The other book that's ongoing is Orlando Fige's Natashas Dance, A Cultural History of Russia, really getting at, I think particularly in the 19th century and then onwards, how Russians defined themselves and what being Russian is, and the various sort of conflicting sort of forces trying to answer that question. And it's been amazing so far. I'm actually, in terms of the book proper, there's tons of notes in here. I'm actually just shy of halfway through, although it doesn't quite look it. But yeah, there are quite a lot of notes and things in the back, and so it's one of those cases where I'll probably finish the book much sooner than I'm expecting to. And they're what I'm reading at the moment. They'll be what I'm focusing on at the beginning of May, and then there are a few projects, a few books that I've sort of earmarked as books I'd like to get to. There are two books here for an event that happens in May, an event created by Jason from Old Blues Chapter and Verse, and it's called Maybe Midrash, which is all about religion and interpretations of religion. And typically what happens is you can choose one work of fiction that addresses religion in some way, and one work of non-fiction. The work of non-fiction, and again, I don't know what I'm going to think of this. I picked up for quite some time ago out of curiosity more than anything. It's called Answer to Job by C.G. Jung. There was some Jung in the book haul that I did the other day, and I was sort of saying there that there are certain elements of Jung that I find interesting from a storytelling perspective, and looking at the history of storytelling and mythology and things like that, which will probably play into this if you're looking at the sort of story of Job. However, the thing that often puts me off Jung and the idea of Jung is the way in which his adherents and the people studying him and the people who really like him sort of cling to him almost like a guru of types. There's this sort of quasi-religious aura to this person who's a psychologist. Maybe in here it's a kind of psychology of religion, or using a religious text, the Book of Job from the Bible, as a psychological tool. I don't really know. I'm expecting to. It feels like something to have it out with him on. I think it's. I don't expect to agree with him, but I think it'll be interesting to sort of push back a bit. We'll see how it goes. And then, since that's going to be quite, I'm expecting that to be a relatively intense reading experience, I thought I'd pick something kind of fictional that's a little lighter but still dealing with religion. So I picked up Paradise Lost, which I've been meaning for ages to read. I've never read Paradise Lost all the way through. I've read excerpts and they've been brilliant, and I've been very silly and not read it. And so I'll be hopefully reading Paradise Lost all the way through in May, and we'll see how that goes. I'm sure there was something else about Milton I was about to bring up. I suppose I was thinking about the sort of hurdles in the way when it comes to reading Milton. That there are a few things. Maybe the first one you'd think of would be the language. He's, a wonderfully proficient user of the English language. He's sort of showing off as he's using it. But there is a temporal distance. English has moved on, and even for his contemporaries, that it was probably a relatively odd English that he's got there. And then there are maybe the two kind of interpretations and the two sort of like truss rods running through the poem that he's sort of playing with. There's the religious material and the political material. So there are going to be lots of references to Christianity, I think particularly to the book of Genesis, but potentially sort of beyond into other books of the Bible, which doesn't daunt me too much. But then there's the Civil War history and the politics of the Civil War, which I've got a kind of rough idea of, but it's never something that I've studied. And this is the proper Civil War, the English Civil War, I suppose. Not any of the other ones. But yeah, I don't know too much about it. I just have a rough idea. So that might be the hurdle I fall on. I'm not too daunted by the language or by the reference to Christianity and to the Old Testament. But I think it's going to be the politics and the history that potentially get me a bit. And then 2 more books that I'm really hoping to get to. These are not completely concrete, but they're slightly more concrete than the books at the very end. We've got one that's just been sat on the shelf for ages, and I'm hoping will be a slight change of pace or tone. I think it's really the only novel on here. It's the Discomfort of Evening by Marieke Rijneveld. Apologies to any is it Dutch watchers. I believe she's from at least somewhere in the Low Countries. I won't be able to find it now. But yeah, I'm looking forward to giving it a go. It's about someone growing up on a dairy farm, I think in a very religious context. So this again may play into maybe Midrash. We'll never know. The thing that got me about this book that made me think it'll be interesting is that the main character apparently has a sensitivity to the cold, and she puts this sort of jelly on her skin that's used to protect cows' udders in winter to stop them from sort of chapping and getting all horrible. And she puts that on her skin. So I feel like it's going to be a really odd, peculiar book. So we'll see. And then the other slightly more concrete but not completely concrete book is one of the books that was hauled in the last video. I think this is the only of those books featured in today's selection, and it's Randall Jarrell's Selected Poems, and it's got the whole collection, The Woman at the Washington Zoo. A poet I've been meaning to get to for some time. I've just seen his name come up from time to time. I think he's in that book I showed you, the Penguin book of the of modernist poetry. It's at the bottom of the pile now. And I think I've heard him mentioned when people are talking about people like Robert Lowell and stuff like that. I guess roughly contemporaneous with people like W.H. Auden. Wrote poems through the Second World War, and I think he died young. If I'm remembering correctly, he was struck down by a car in relative, when he was relatively young. Yeah, who knows where else he may have gone. And that's where I also know him from, actually, just thinking about it, his translations of Rilke. I just saw Rilke's name on the back. That's also where his name has popped up in the past. So there are the more concrete books I'd like to get to. As I said at the beginning of the video, there are a few books I'm sort of dipping in and out of. I've got an ongoing project throughout the year to make my way through all of Montaigne's essays and all of The Anatomy of Melancholy. I haven't read anything from The Anatomy of Melancholy since at least March, I think, maybe earlier. I've read the first partition. There are 3 partitions. The first is the longest, so I got a good chunk of it out of the way. But I need to keep going, and I've been putting it off for too long. Putting it off is not quite the right word. I've been distracted. Is more of it. We've just had. I mean, one of the things he just discussed was, since it's all about melancholy, is about the question of suicide and whether it's a valid response to melancholy, and he's trying to get to the bottom of that. He's writing the whole thing because he's essentially, suffering from depression and trying to make sense of it. And so he wrote this, just a short thing to work it out. But he's about to go on in this partition. Looking into cures to melancholy. Curiously, this first bit is unlawful cures rejected, so potentially past cures to melancholy that maybe didn't work and maybe were a little dangerous, but we'll find out. So I'll be cracking on with this. I'm not sure if I'll crack on with Montaigne. And the other thing that I was hoping to get to a little bit more in April, and I may do before the month is out, he says, with 1 day to go. But I would like to read some more from Bell's English Poetry. And this first volume is Early Ballads, and I'm up to A Tale of Robin Hood. I think then there's Robin Hood and Little John after it. And so maybe in May, if I make this a bit more, and there's, Robin Hood's Death and Burial as well. I may have read these before, because I spent some time looking at Robin Hood ballads and retellings of Robin Hood stories while I was at university. So I've probably read at least 1 or 2 of the Robin Hood ballads in here, but maybe they'll be what I concentrate on in the month of May. And that is everything. So there are my plans. I think I am glad that I was doing this separately to the wrap up for April. Sort of felt like I had a bit more space to talk about my plans and maybe why I'm choosing certain books. The only other thing sort of hogging me, the other thing sort of niggling at the back of my head is something that may have been suggested in the book haul that I posted the other day, which is that I'm feeling a pull towards W.G. Sebald, and I'm not sure exactly which way I'm going to go with the next of his books and whether I dive in at some point in April. That may be something I do impulsively, but I'm not sure, so we'll see if my plans are dashed by Sebald. But otherwise, that's potentially how things will be looking. So I'll leave it there. I hope I look normal, or normal by my standards. In the last video, for whatever reason, everything was really saturated, and I couldn't quite work out how that happened. So hopefully I look a bit more normal. But anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you have a great May. Let me know if you have any books that you're planning to read and why you're excited about reading them, any events I might have missed, anything like that. So again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.